Sometimes, what hurts you isn't that they didn't love you enough. It's the way you kept trying to hold on to that love at any cost. You send one more message. You explain one more time. You wait a little longer, and you convince yourself it's patience, it's understanding, it's fighting for love. But in reality, little by little, you're lowering your own standards. You start accepting things you once knew weren't enough. You're no longer just hoping to be loved. You're quietly trading your self-respect just to keep a connection alive. The dangerous part is, when you're in it, you don't realize you're desperate. It doesn't feel like weakness. It feels like effort. It doesn't feel like losing your value. It feels like sacrifice. And that confusion is what takes you further than you ever needed to go. Until one day, you realize the pain isn't just that they left, it's that you stayed too long in a place where you had to shrink yourself, just to be kept. You think you need love, but if you look deeper, what you're really searching for is proof. Proof that you matter. Proof that you're not forgotten. Proof that you're still enough to be chosen. And that need is what makes everything exhausting. You're not just waiting for a message, you're waiting to feel at ease. You're not just wanting attention, you want it to quiet the doubts inside you. At that point, love is no longer a natural connection. It becomes something you use to stabilize your emotions. When they're warm, you feel relief. When they're silent, you feel anxious. Every small change starts to carry big meaning, because you've placed too much of your value on their behavior, and that's when love becomes heavy. Not because it's complicated, but because you're using it to answer questions you were meant to answer for yourself. When you need someone else to prove your worth, you'll never feel like it's enough. No matter how much they give, the more you try to keep someone by lowering yourself, the more you quietly teach them they don't have to do much. When you're always the one reaching out first, explaining first, forgiving first, the relationship starts running on a dangerous pattern. They give less, and you still stay. Inconsistency becomes normal. Silence becomes acceptable. Half-hearted effort starts to feel like enough. You think you're being patient for love, but in reality, you're removing any reason for them to do better. When you keep filling the gaps with your own effort, they'll never feel the need to change, and one day, you realize you've gotten used to the bare minimum simply because you stayed too long in an unbalanced relationship. What makes it hard to let go isn't deep love. It's that you're caught in an emotional loop. When they show care, you feel relief. When they go silent, you feel anxious. Then a small sign appears, and you feel hope again. That cycle keeps repeating, making you think you're in love when really, you're reacting to instability. The intensity makes everything feel powerful. But intense doesn't mean lasting. You're not being nourished consistently, you're being pulled back and forth, between lack and just enough. And that inconsistency is what hooks you, because you're always waiting for the next moment things might feel better. But the truth is, a relationship that keeps you anxious is not a place to stay, no matter how much it makes you feel. You're not just attached to a person, you're attached to the feeling of being chosen by them. You start to believe that if they love you the right way, you'll finally feel worthy. Important. Enough. But that's a dangerous belief. When your value depends on someone else's choice, you'll always feel unstable. You begin to tolerate more just to keep the chance of being chosen, and the more you try, the more you lose yourself. The truth is, whether they choose you or not doesn't define who you are. Silence isn't how you punish someone, it's how you stop hurting yourself. When you stop sending that extra message, stop explaining, stop trying to hold a connection at any cost, you create the distance You need to see things clearly. Before, you kept filling the silence with your own effort, so you couldn't see the truth. But when you step back, their actions start to speak louder than any words. You begin to see who actually tries and who only shows up when it's convenient. This kind of silence isn't cold, it's clarity. It gives you space to hear yourself again, instead of chasing something that keeps draining you. And sometimes, that's the first step to saving yourself. The right kind of love doesn't require you to constantly explain why you deserve to be treated well. You don't have to convince someone that care, consistency, and respect matter. If they're real, they show up naturally. When you have to repeat your needs over and over, when you have to teach someone how to love you, that's no longer a healthy connection. You're not loving anymore. You're arguing just to be loved. And a relationship that leaves you this exhausted was never right to begin with. Boundaries aren't what you say, they're what you do afterward. You can say you deserve respect, that you need clarity, consistency, but if your behavior stays the same, replying instantly, always being available, accepting ambiguity, then those boundaries don't exist. They're just feelings, not reality. A real boundary changes how you allow people to access you. It makes it harder for you to stay in situations that hurt you. It forces others to see the difference, not through your words, but through your repeated actions. At first, it can be hard, because action often comes with loss. But without change, everything becomes a loop. You explain. They apologize. And nothing really shifts. And that loop is what keeps you stuck the longest. You don't need to be the one who keeps everything stable in a relationship. When you're always the one who understands, who gives in, who calms things down, who explains everything you're not really loving anymore, you're carrying. You're holding both sides of the emotions, trying to keep the connection from breaking, trying to make everything feel okay. But love isn't one person constantly fixing things while the other just receives. At first, it might make you feel mature, like you know how to love, like you're capable of sacrifice. But over time, it drains you. You stop feeling supported and start feeling like you're working inside the relationship. You become exhausted. Yet you stay because you believe you understand enough to hold it together. But the truth is, if a relationship only exists because you keep forcing yourself to hold it up, then what exists there is not balanced love. When you step back, you finally see the truth clearly. Before, you were always the one reaching out, explaining, holding the connection together, so it was hard to know what they really wanted. But when you stop, when you no longer fill the silence with your own effort, everything starts to reveal itself. Those who truly care will move toward you. Those who were just used to you being there will slowly go quiet. What matters isn't what they say when you pull away, it's how they change. After that, words can come quickly. When you start coming back to yourself, everything changes quietly. At first, it may feel empty. No more messages to wait for. No more emotional highs and lows. No more familiar busyness of thinking about them. But slowly, your mind becomes calmer. You're no longer analyzing every action, every silence. You begin to realize how much energy you once spent just trying to hold on to something uncertain. And in that quiet, something important happens. Your standards begin to shift naturally. What once gave you hope no longer feels like enough. Ambiguity is no longer attractive. Inconsistency is no longer worth waiting for. Not because you've become cold, but because you've experienced what peace feels like. And once you've felt that kind of peace, you won't easily go back to what once made you feel unsettled. The emptiness after you let go isn't a sign that you were wrong. It's a sign that you're breaking free from an emotional habit. When you stop texting, stop waiting, stop revolving your life around one person, everything suddenly becomes quiet in an unfamiliar way. And that quiet can feel uncomfortable. You might mistake it for loss, for loneliness, for something missing. But in reality, you're not just moving away from a person, you're stepping out of a loop that once took up your entire mind. That emptiness is real, because before, you were always busy hoping, waiting, thinking, imagining. When all of that stops, your mind needs time to adjust. It may try to pull you back, not because it was good, but because it was familiar. But if you stay with that emptiness long enough, something else begins to appear, space for yourself. And that's where you begin to rebuild your life, no longer centered around someone else. You're not giving up on love. You're letting go of a way of loving that made you lose yourself. When you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop trying to hold on to someone who isn't clear, you might think you're becoming cold. But in truth, you're becoming clear. Before, the lack made you see everything differently. A little attention was enough to give you hope. A small sign was enough to make you stay. You weren't seeing love as it is. You were seeing it through the lens of fear, fear of losing. And when fear leads, you accept things that a clearer version of you would never accept. But when you come back to yourself, love becomes cleaner. You can still care. You can still open your heart. But there's no desperation. You don't need someone else to prove your worth anymore. And that's when you're truly ready for a kind of love that doesn't require you to lose yourself. The real turning point isn't when someone else changes. It's when you stop asking for permission to matter. For a long time, you may have been used to waiting for others to confirm your worth, waiting for them to care more, to be clearer, to choose you with certainty. But when you stop, you begin to realize something important. Your value was never meant to be approved by anyone else. When you stop placing yourself in someone else's hands, everything starts to shift. You no longer say yes to things that make you feel small. You no longer chase connections that drain you. You start choosing differently, not because you've stopped loving, but because you're no longer willing to trade your self-respect just to keep someone. This change is quiet, but powerful. You don't need to prove anything anymore. You don't need to be chosen to feel enough. And that's when your life begins to realign around clarity, around peace, and around a version of you that no longer has to beg to be loved.